Our world today doesn't understand the goth.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you.
No, not that. I'm talking about the OG goth. Homies like Bram Stoker, EAP, and of course, Mary Shelley. When it comes to understanding the past in general, our 21st century society just doesn't really seem to get it.
I don't understand. I don't know what's going on here.
I see it over and over with films based on historical events, historical figures, or classic literature. Modern writers just can't seem to help but view the past through a modern lens, reinterpreting both fiction and non-fiction through their own modern worldview. A worldview which is far, far removed from the historical worldview that gave context to the past. You see, we've entered the era of the film industry where originality, innovation, passion, and soul are long gone, and all that matters is a soulless pursuit of the almighty dollar. This is the era of remakes, reboots, and reimaginings of previously successful works of art, where executives piggyback off of historical success to make a quick, dependable buck for shareholders.
For the shareholders.
Because modern movie budgets continue to explode and bloat, executives would rather not risk millions of dollars of investor capital into something new and original that is not certain to succeed, and creatives at the mercy of these executives find themselves in a bit of a pickle, as they are forced to retell the same stories over and over again, but still having the creative desire to produce something new and different. And I think this is the crux of why we keep getting reboots and reimaginings of classic stories, as creatives want to tell their own stories under the guise of a previously established piece of work, the latest offender being Del Toro's Frankenstein. Despite the near universal praise this movie gets, thematically, Del Toro's Frankenstein is a trash bag of a film, a watered down, worse version of the original story. And before you hit the dislike button, I invite you to watch this whole video to the end, so I can make my case for why Del Toro, and by extension the modern world, doesn't understand Frankenstein. Welcome to The Body Aesthetic, my name is Matthew. With the unregulated rise of artificial intelligence, robotics, genetic manipulation, and transhumanism, the original story of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is one our culture desperately needs to hear right now. But instead of that story, we got a $120 million therapy session for Del Toro's Daddy Issues, a film that falls short of everything it tries to parrot in the source material. I have a lot to say about this movie, so let's just get into it. I honestly don't understand the praise this movie gets, especially from popular YouTube movie critics like Nerdrotic and The Critical Drinker, who by the way I'm huge fans of. But both have criticized other creatives for committing the same sins that Del Toro does in Frankenstein, creating a multi-million-dollar self-insert film using an established, well-beloved IP to act as an egotistical therapy session. I guess it's different when it's our guy. Now don't get me wrong, Del Toro's Frankenstein is a visually stunning film. The aesthetics, costumes, set design, cinematography, and the score are all top class. But isn't that always the problem with modern media? All flash and sparkles on the surface but with little sense or substance on the inside. A whitewashed tomb, a famous carpenter might say. From a technical standpoint, it is a very well-made film, but that's not what I will be critiquing here. What I want to talk about is the writing and creative decisions made with this classic story, the central themes and messages that this movie puts forward, as well as the 21st century undertones that permeate this 19th century classic. Because once again, a famous historical work of fiction is reimagined through a modern framework.
Why?
And as usual, the result ends with a modern retelling that waters down the themes and messages of the source material. There is very little of what made Mary Shelley's Frankenstein so culturally impactful to be found in Del Toro's 2025 film. Because Del Toro wasn't interested in telling Shelley's story. He was interested in telling his own story, using the skin and appearance of the original, almost like this film was his own Frankenstein monster, which is actually unintentionally genius in that regard. But in doing so, the film loses all the soul and impact of the original story. A story of which we actually desperately need in 2025. Now before we can analyze this supposedly gothic film, however, we have to understand what is goth, and what characteristics make up gothic literature. But before we get into that, we have a quick word from the sponsor of this video. Me! I'm the sponsor. Subscribe now or...
You ugly.
You see, Gothic is a narrative style that overlapped with the British Romantic movement in early 19th century Europe. A broad cultural movement characterized by individualism, emotion, imagination, and the reverence of nature. Conceptually, you could say the Gothic is the darker counterpart to Romanticism, one that explored the darker recesses of the repressed human subconscious, namely the emotions of fear, dread, apprehension, and anxiety. The Gothic is mostly characterized by a sustained atmosphere that elicits these emotions. This emotional atmosphere is the foundation of what makes a work of art Gothic, and why common Gothic elements include ruined castles, moonlit nights, heavy storms, madness, ghosts, monsters, and other supernatural phenomena. And I would be remiss to not discuss another extremely important element of Gothic storytelling, and that is the element of the sublime. To the Romantics, the sublime is a transcendent experience, an emotionally overwhelming experience that combines awe, reverence, and even terror in a way that expanded mind and soul. The sublime was an experience from encountering the powerful forces of nature that makes one feel small and insignificant. Think enormous, imposing mountains, raging storms, immense waterfalls, vast and seemingly infinite landscapes. It is not simply the adoration of beauty, but the blending of beauty and terror. A spiritual experience from encountering forces beyond ourselves. Gothic literature uses the sublime as a mechanism to enhance themes of fear, awe, uncertainty, and human smallness. Where Romantic sublime might uplift or spiritually elevate, Gothic sublime intensifies vulnerability. Now, Shelley's Frankenstein is a Gothic horror story. A Gothic story with a Gothic atmosphere, but with a focus on horror, fear, dread, and the macabre. And while there are many themes to be found in the original, ultimately the central message of Shelley's Frankenstein is a cautionary tale against the reckless pursuit of scientific progress. You see, the Romantic movement was a reactionary critique of a century of Enlightenment thinking, which dominated European cultural thought at the time, where the Enlightenment championed rationality, objectivity, knowledge, and scientific pursuit. Romanticism celebrated passion, intuition, imagination, and subjective experience. Romantics like Mary Shelley were wary of the Enlightenment going too far, by engorging itself on scientific progress with reckless abandon, in pursuing knowledge and technology simply for the sake of it, without consideration for consequence. Sound familiar?
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
The possibility of giving life to the lifeless through science and technology, and such a powerful, immortal, and seemingly invulnerable creature being loosed upon the world, was a very real fear for people in the early 19th century. And this kind of fear is still relevant to us today.
The all-new Atlas is capable of moving in what I would call superhuman ways, which is one thing I suspect we'll be seeing more of as humanoid robotics technology advances.
Ah yes, man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. In any case, the original Frankenstein is subtitled The Modern Prometheus, in reference to the Greek myth of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humanity, granting them technology and civilization, which also parallels the biblical narrative of Genesis, specifically the fall of man. In the biblical creation story, man partakes of the forbidden fruit in order to be like God. Much like Prometheus, man steals the power of God to empower himself, ultimately usurping the divine. And isn't that pretty much exactly what science does? With modern technology, we have the power to cure disease, mitigate pain, extend and preserve life, the power to defy forces that were once beyond our control. And in doing so, we usurp God. As we are no longer subject to the will and power of God, man's repeated attempts at conquering death through technology, in other words, through external means, is the Tower of Babel story, also found in the book of Genesis. I explain the meaning behind the Tower of Babel story in depth in this video, linked in the description so you can understand what I'm talking about. So let's finally get to talking about this dang movie. Aside from the aesthetics, there's very little goth or horror to be found in this film. No great fear, anxiety, or dread. In fact, this movie made me laugh more than anything else.
He was the breeze, I was the storm cloud. He was all laughter, I was all frowns.
What?
That line seriously made me laugh my ass off in the theater. Like, good God, so much of the dialogue is atrocious in this movie.
Confession? What would such a delicate, pious creature have to confess to?
What would such a pious, delicate creature have to confess to? I know I said I was only going to critique the writing in this movie, but damn, Oscar Isaac's accent is hilarious. Anyways, there isn't much notion of the sublime in this film either. The environment and set pieces are grand and beautiful, yes, but not sublime as Goth understands it. I suppose it could be argued that Elizabeth's first encounter with the creature is a sublime experience, but that's it. And as much as I don't care for Mia Goth's acting in this movie, she definitely nails that scene. However, this movie is much more lighthearted and much less macabre than the original source it's pulled from, because again, modern people don't seem to understand the past. Allow me to prove it to you. Though there had been a century of Enlightenment thinking overthrowing the old order of Christian thought and tradition by the time Shelley wrote Frankenstein, most people still had the sensibilities of the Christian old world. One of those sensibilities being the respect for the body, before and especially after death. You see, Christianity believes that the human body is sacred and an integral part of a person, even after death, as the Bible describes the body as a temple for the Holy Spirit, deserving of a certain level of reverence and respect, grounded in the Christian doctrine of the resurrection of the body, which affirms that the body will be reunited with the soul in a glorified form when Christ returns. To the reader in Shelley's time, Victor's robbing of graves and defilement of dead bodies in order to create the creature is immensely scandalous, the kind of thing that would make a person faint in those days. Even Victor himself has a sense of guilt and shame, though he cannot help himself in pursuing his goal. He knows that what he's doing is wrong and is contrary to God and nature, which is why Victor pursues his goal in secret, away from prying eyes, completely contrary to the Victor in Del Toro's film. The film itself even addresses this change in the following scene.
Why provoke them? Why not just carry on without calling attention to yourself in such a manner?
How safe, even by your standards, William. I, on the other hand, fail to see why modesty is considered a virtue at all. If life can be regenerated, not as a mere simulation, but as a divine act by physical, chemical means, why whisper it?
So the film doesn't present any kind of scandal associated with Victor's goal and his means to achieve it. The film mostly presents his pursuit as a proud exploration of science, rather than a violation of the natural order. In fact, the only characters that tell Victor what he's doing is wrong are these goobers in the hearing scene towards the beginning, of whom the movie kind of makes fun of, or at least doesn't take seriously.
This is unholy, an abomination, an obscenity! God gives life, and God takes it, Victor. Perhaps God is enough!
Even Elizabeth is on board with everything, deciding only to criticize Victor for his obsessiveness in his pursuit and his eventual abuse of the creature.
Why is he chained here?
For his own safety and for mine. It's easier to clean and maintain it, and it doesn't know any better.
But you do.
Like, that's the problem. Not the whole defying God, abandoning all morals and ethics to resurrect a dead body, irreverently stitched together from a number of corpses, essentially practicing necromancy. The kind of thing that was horrific and scandalous to Shelley's audience in the 19th century. Yet here we are in the 21st century, witnessing a man cutting dead flesh, sawing bone, hacking limbs, flaying skin, and playing with tendons to whimsical music? This was the most jarring and odd scene in the film, but a perfect example to illustrate my point. So what the frig is happening here? Remember when I said that Romanticism and the Gothic were a critique of the Enlightenment? What you're witnessing in the scene is the Gothic being reinterpreted through a mind that is the product of the Enlightenment. While the historical period known as the Enlightenment may be over, its core ideals continue to influence modern thought and political discourse to this day. In overthrowing the old Christian order, the Age of Enlightenment proposed a different worldview. One much more materialist, secular, and empirical. Where the Christians saw the body as a temple inherently good as created by God, the enlightened thinker treats the flesh more debased and irreverently, seeing the body simply as a bag of mostly water.
Bags of mostly water.
Bags of mostly water? An accurate description of humans, sir. You are over 90% water surrounded by a flexible container.
Or a meat popsicle.
Sir, are you classified as human? Negative. I am a meat popsicle.
A purely physical vessel of flesh to be dissected, torn apart, experimented upon, and measured. Nothing sacred, spiritual, or metaphysical about it. And this kind of materialist thinking still permeates and dominates our modernist worldview to this day, which is why such a scene can be produced in such a widely presented audience in our day and age, and nobody is scandalized. Nobody even bats an eye. In fact, the opposite is true. It receives praise. Though it should be, there's nothing truly horrific or macabre in this sequence. It's all very sterile and scientific. What's happening in this sequence is the Enlightenment appropriating the Gothic, which was supposed to critique the Enlightenment in the first place. Proof that the Enlightenment philosophy ultimately won the battle for the hearts and minds of the Western world. Hey Simon, do you have any questions for our viewers on YouTube?
Do you perform the natural obligations?
Natural obligations? You mean liking, sharing, and subscribing? Well, have you? Another gripe I have with this movie are the Christian motifs that Del Toro throws in that could have been interesting, but ultimately go nowhere. Instead of the typical operating table that most films depict for the resurrection of the creature, Del Toro chooses the form of a cross, providing an interesting image of an unholy, inverted version of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, even though there ends up being truly nothing unholy about it. The creature in the book and the movie is referred to as Adam, an obvious reference to the creation of the first man. But Christ in Scripture is also referred to as the second or final Adam, the one to correct the first Adam's mistake, and be the man Adam was meant to be. So in putting the creature on the cross, Del Toro is drawing comparison not just to the creation of the first man, but to Jesus Christ himself. You can tell somebody went to Catholic school. Del Toro paints the creature as a literal Jesus figure, further solidified when Elizabeth posits that the creature is born without sin.
What if in being in you the spirit that animates him is simpler, purer than that of the common man? What if unrestrained by sin, our Creator's breath came into its wounded flesh directly?
Good God, Elizabeth.
While it's extremely vague what exactly Elizabeth has been searching for her whole life, she somehow sees it in the creature, and why she falls in love with him in the movie. Which is such an extremely retarded plotline, I'm not even going to touch on it in this video. The movie paints the creature as a pure soul, innocent, sinless, and essentially perfect. Again, a Christ-like figure. Even when the creature kills, he only ever does so by accident or self-defense, solely because the world judges him to be a monster and a freak due to his outward appearance, which beguiles the kind innocence within. And here we have another theme in the book that gets watered down in Del Toro's film. You see, the creature in the book is also born innocent as a baby, but due to his disgusting and disfigured appearance, the world repeatedly treats him like a monster, despite his honest and innocent attempts at authentic connection with others. And because of this experience, he resigns to become the monster the world treats him to be. And after Victor denies him the companionship he craves by not creating a wife for him, he decides to indulge in his rage, in true emotional, romantic fashion.
If you are not to award me love, then I will indulge in rage.
It is here the creature becomes a savage, brutal, and calculated killer, hell-bent on ruining Victor's life by taking away the things he loves, and building this atmosphere in Victor's life of terror and suspense, Victor never knowing when, where, or how the creature will strike. One of the most bone-chilling lines in the book is when the creature tells Victor, "I will be with you on your wedding night." And it is exactly on Victor's wedding night that the creature murders Elizabeth just to torture Victor. Simply put, not a nice guy at all. But the creature of the film is completely different. Again, he only ever kills by accident or self-defense. Del Toro even chooses to have Elizabeth killed not by the premeditated hand of the creature, but by Victor's. Hey viewer, you've gotten this far. Have you performed the natural YouTube obligations? No? The tagline of the movie shown on the marketing material is, "Only monsters play God," indicating that Victor is the real monster because of his creation of the creature. But that is not the actual criticism of Victor the film puts forward. He's only criticized for how he treats the creature and others around him, and his obsession in pursuing his goals, no matter the cost.
But the moment we're free, we're setting sails forwards, no matter the cost. You share my madness.
The film's main criticism of Victor is his relentless pursuit of his goals, and willingness to sacrifice the people around him to achieve it, and his unwillingness to take responsibility for his actions, not the actual goal itself. You know, the goal of assembling piles of human corpses, chopping them into pieces, and sewing them together in direct defiance of God and nature. That's not the problem. Do you see what I'm getting at here? You have to remember that this movie is made by an atheist with a Catholic childhood, a modern mind informed by the Enlightenment, as we discussed. And though the romantics of the 19th century were largely atheistic themselves, they still had a deeper understanding of the Christian worldview, simply by proximity of the times, which is why the Frankenstein book understands why playing God makes you a monster. But Del Toro does not. Again, he's slapping on the motifs and themes of the source material as a skin onto an entirely different creation, reinterpreting all of it through the modern lens. And it all makes total sense when you find out that the creature in the film is just a self-insert for Del Toro.
And I said, this is my shepherd, this creature. This is me. I'm not of this world. I'm something weird.
Do you identify more with Victor Frankenstein,
No,
the
monster,
creature?
The creature.
Del Toro turned the creature into this wholesome, pure, sinless, innocent being that takes no accountability for himself, because all of his bad deeds are because of how the outside world and other people treat him. And he even earns the love and interest of women despite his ugly outward appearance. Holy narcissism, Batman. In true 21st century fashion, the creature, and by extension Del Toro, doesn't face a single consequence for his actions. Because remember, it's not his fault. It's the world, the outside, the external. No self-reflection or awareness needed. At the end, the ship captain even just lets the creature go without repercussion, even though the creature killed at least 6 of his men. What the frig, man? You'd think the captain of a brutal, risky, extremely long expedition like this would have some sense of kinship or at least duty to his men, enough to give the slightest bit of a shib. Instead, he sides with an enormous abomination of mankind because my feelings and my abusive father. Anyway, whatever. The central theme of this movie is not the mad pursuit of science. It's the healing of generational trauma passed down from fathers to sons. The breaking the cycle of trauma and abuse through the act of forgiveness. Specifically, Del Toro coming to terms with forgiving the sins of his father. A laudable message, to be sure, but do you see why I say this whole movie is just an egotistical therapy session? In any case, at the end of the day, despite the themes being haphazard, disjointed, and not at all gothic, I think this movie gets the praise it does because we're so starved for beauty, and this movie is actually a beautiful piece of cinema. But while the message of forgiveness in this film is praiseworthy, the warning of the original Frankenstein story is the cultural message that society really needs to hear right now. With the relentless and unregulated pursuit of more and more advanced AI and robotics, our obsession with transcending sickness and death with transhumanism, Elon Musk wanting to put chips in your brain, which then AI can use to decode your very thoughts.
Like, what should a thing that you use to make art have anything to do with reading your brain? So in this one, they said, can they understand the inner monologue, the things you're saying to yourself in your own mind? So our thoughts, are starting to be decoded. Yeah, just think about what this means for authoritarian states, for instance.
Covering the planet with Wi-Fi using Starlink, which then AI can use to track anyone, anywhere, at any time.
Real-time 3D pose estimation, right? So suddenly AI has turned every Wi-Fi router into a camera that can work in the dark, specially tuned for tracking living beings.
We are straight up actively building Skynet. The Terminator movies have never felt more real. Combine this with the rampant manipulation of genetics, CRISPR gene editing, designer babies. It's like every day we're introduced to new man-made horrors beyond comprehension. Because we are Prometheus. And we are Adam. We have stolen fire from the gods. We have eaten the forbidden fruit. And in our hubris we are once again building the Tower of Babel, to siege the gates of heaven and usurp God's throne. And as Mary Shelley tried to warn us 200 years ago, it will ultimately be to our own destruction. I want to thank you very much for watching. Please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And I'll see you in the next video. But if you haven't subscribed yet, then...
You are gay.